It has been 5 years since we said goodbye to Reverend Billy Graham. The North Carolina native was 99 years old when he died at his home in Montreat. Reverend Graham was, of course, dubbed America's pastor for his magnetic and his widespread preaching. But here in North Carolina, we saw him as our pastor. Today, we take a look back and remember Reverend Billy Graham and his lifelong mission to spread the word and how his legacy lives on.
By faith, I said, I believe him. And he came into my heart and changed my life. And now I'm ready when I hear that call to go into the presence of God.
Graham was an ordained Southern Baptist minister, and to the world, he was a prominent evangelical Christian figure, deemed one of the most influential Christian leaders. He became known, of course, for his preaching, not just in churches, but at the revivals and intense and open-air coliseums all over the world. Over time, he became one of the first people to understand the power of new technology like radio, television, and eventually the internet. The Los Angeles Crusade in 1949 really launched his career as a rising young evangelist. According to the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, he preached to more people in live audiences than anyone else in history. Now, this is an incredible statistic. 215 million people in more than 185 countries and territories, not to mention the hundreds of millions more on television, radio, and the written word, heard his voice.
And as you come, you're saying, I do want to change my way of living. I do want to please God. I do want to accept his love and his mercy.
Billy Graham was named after his father, and he grew up on a dairy farm near Charlotte. He was the oldest of 4 children. He attended a revival when he was 16 years old, and he credits his mission to that meeting. He furthered his religious training at Bob Jones University and Florida Bible Institute before transferring to Wheaton College in Illinois. He graduated with a degree in anthropology, and it's there at Wheaton where he met Ruth Bell. They were married in 1943. It was a love that lasted for decades. They had 5 children together, and they continue to carry out his legacy through his ministries. When our nation nearly shattered from the 9/11 attacks, it was America's pastor who helped mend our hearts.
September 11 will go down in our history as a day to remember. No matter how hard we try, words simply cannot express the horror, the shock, and the revulsion we all feel over what took place in this nation on Tuesday morning.
This was one of the many times that he counseled the country as a whole and our nation's leaders, but he had a long life of service. Graham met every president since Harry Truman. He counseled 12 sitting presidents, including Barack Obama. He was known as the pastor to the presidents.
Every life Billy Graham ever touched, including people who never became president, never spoke at a crusade, is better because he was a good and faithful servant.
My testimony today is that I'm just one of tens of millions of people whose spiritual lives have been shaped by Billy Graham.
The humble farmer's son who helped change the world is a spiritual gift to all of us.
The Reverend's audience for his sermons grew as technology did. His words reached millions of households across the U.S. and the world. According to Samaritan's Purse, his final message aired on more than 480 stations back in 2013. His last message was a culmination of his My Hope America project. At his 95th birthday party, he told hundreds of his party guests the country was in need of a spiritual awakening, and he showed the world his last project, a half-hour video called My Hope America. His son Franklin called it his dad's last message to the nation. Now, across the nation, Graham established organizations and received recognitions in his honor as well as in his memory. The Billy Graham Evangelistic Association for BGEA was founded in 1950. It is now headquartered in Charlotte. In 2019, this is what you're looking at in D.C. The Museum of the Bible had an exhibit in honor of Graham, labeling him the Pilgrim Preacher. In most recent news, North Carolina lawmakers were in D.C. in attempts to speed up a process set in place years ago. They're working to get a statue of Billy Graham in the U.S. Capitol. In 2015, a request was approved to replace the statue of Charles Brantley Aycock. In 2020, a statue design was proposed. It took over a year to be approved. Now, Reverend Graham touched the hearts of communities and around the world. However, here in North Carolina, he made a specifically big impact. Billy Graham spent 6 weeks in Greensboro back in 1951, for example. It was supposed to be just a 4-week stay, but he preached as long as the crowds would come. Organizers had to build a temporary tabernacle on West Lee Street. Its 10,000 seats were not enough for all of the folks who responded to Graham's evening altar calls. As a result of the crusade in Greensboro, the Trinity Church near Guilford College began. Doors there opened in 1951, and the church is still active today. Montreat, North Carolina, of course, near and dear to the Graham family. He and his wife Ruth were married in Montreat on the Montreat College campus chapel. Decades later, it would be named for the couple. Of course, they were heavily involved in the community and widely loved for their devotion. The Billy Graham Library is a public museum documenting the life and the ministry of the Christian evangelist. It's just a few miles from where he was born and raised in Charlotte. Now, Graham at first opposed the idea of building the library named after him. He said it would detract from his message. But after some reconsideration, Graham agreed to the library, saying it was a tool to the gospel and hoped it would speak to all those who passed through. His son, Asheville native Franklin Graham, followed in his father's footsteps with his devotion to others. He serves as the president and CEO of the human aid organization Samaritan's Purse. The company goes in and helps, of course, in disaster times. Billy Graham, he lived an extraordinary life, and we were honored to watch it from right here in North Carolina. Here's just a few quotes from him. They may be among your very favorites. First off, God has given us two hands, one to receive and the other to give with. Here's another. Nothing can bring a real sense of security into the home except truth.